Corinne Matthews and Richard Hale never imagined their paths would cross under such sinister circumstances, yet one fateful night at the Bayview Grand Hotel would turn both of their lives and the lives of everyone around them into a chilling story no one could forget. Corinne Matthews had a way of entering a room that made people instantly uneasy. It wasn't because she was loud or flamboyant. It was the air of entitlement that clung to her like expensive perfume. When she pulled her silver SUV into the circular driveway of the Bayview Grand Hotel, she didn't even glance at the valet waiting politely at the curb. Instead, she double-parked, blocking traffic behind her, and tossed her keys onto the nearest luggage cart without so much as eye contact. The Bayview Grand wasn't just any hotel. It was a historic property perched on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, a place known for its marble lobby, chandeliers that sparkled like stars, and a reputation for discretion. It had been operating for nearly a century, catering to the wealthy and the well-connected. Guests usually arrived with a sense of awe, humbled by the building's grand presence. Corinne, however, looked around as though she were entering a place built for her personal enjoyment. At the front desk, she demanded early check-in despite arriving hours before the official time. The clerk politely explained that the room wasn't ready. Corinne didn't care. She leaned over the counter, voice sharp, insisting that the staff make it ready immediately. Her behavior drew glances from other guests in line, though no one dared intervene. The hotel had dealt with difficult clients before, but Corinne's energy was different. She radiated the kind of arrogance that suggested she truly believed rules were optional. She wasn't trying to bend the system, she simply acted as if she was the exception to it. When her suite was finally prepared, Corinne made another scene. She rejected the Ocean View Junior suite she had booked and demanded to be moved to a larger corner suite without paying the difference. "The hotel owes me," she declared to no one in particular as she rolled her oversized luggage toward the elevators. Guests and staff exchanged looks, silently acknowledging the tension she brought with her. For them, Corinne was simply an inconvenience. They had no idea she would soon become the center of something far more sinister. Corinne's entitlement didn't stop once she entered her room. Housekeeping staff reported that she scattered her belongings across the suite like she was claiming territory. She ignored the hotel's no-smoking policy, leaving the faint but unmistakable scent of cigarettes drifting into the hallway. She helped herself to amenities from carts left outside other guests' rooms, snatching bottles of water and toiletries as if they belonged to her. She even parked in the reserved spots near the entrance, spaces marked for disabled guests, and brushed off any attempt at correction. Every action she took was layered with the same uncheckable belief none of the rules applied to her. What made Corinne especially unsettling was not just her disregard for hotel policies, but the way she seemed to watch people. Staff noticed her eyes lingering a little too long on other guests. She observed their comings and goings, memorizing routines with a sharpness that didn't match her otherwise careless attitude. She wasn't simply being nosy. There was intent behind her gaze, a hunger that no one recognized at the time. For the moment, she was just another difficult guest at a luxury hotel. But as the ocean crashed against the cliffs below and the sun set behind the glittering chandeliers, a dark shadow stretched silently behind her arrival. Corinne Matthews had stepped into the Bayview Grand convinced she was above everyone else, unaware that arrogance would soon mark the beginning of something far darker than late check-ins and suite upgrades. By the second night of Corinne's stay, the Bayview Grand was beginning to feel unsettled. Guests had whispered complaints about her since the moment she checked in, but now the unease had spread beyond irritation. It started with sounds late into the night. Long after the hotel quieted down, muffled thuds could be heard coming from her suite. At first, neighbors assumed she was moving furniture around. But the scraping noise repeated itself again and again as though something heavy was being dragged across the polished floor. Then came the footsteps. Guests in the hallway swore they heard pacing back and forth long after midnight, with sudden bursts of running that ended in silence. One couple reported a sharp bang on their wall just as they were trying to sleep, followed by an eerie hush as if someone were listening closely from the other side. The strangest complaint of all came from the family staying directly next to her. They noticed a sour, metallic odor seeping through the vents. It was faint at first, a smell they couldn't quite place, but by morning it had grown stronger. They mentioned it to housekeeping when they passed in the hall, only to be told that access to Karen's room was impossible. She had refused the daily cleaning service, snapping at staff who knocked on her door. "No one comes in, no exceptions," she had said firmly before slamming it shut. Most guests declined housekeeping from time to time, but Karen's insistence was different. She guarded her suite like it contained something valuable or dangerous. Hotel employees tried to dismiss the growing concerns, chalking it up to another entitled guest making things uncomfortable. But the reports kept piling up. The night manager received 3 separate calls about disturbances in the same wing, all tied to the room Karen occupied. The noises, the odor, the strange shadows under her door at odd hours, they all seemed connected. Security was dispatched to check, but Karen intercepted them before they could enter. She appeared calm but sharp, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She claimed the guests were lying, inventing stories because they were jealous of her suite. Her tone carried the same arrogance she had displayed since arrival, the kind that dared anyone to challenge her. Reluctantly, staff stepped back, bound by the hotel's policy to respect guest privacy. Still, unease lingered. Employees began noticing Karen roaming the halls during the early morning hours. She moved quietly, barefoot, her eyes sharp and unblinking as she passed closed doors. Once, a bellhop swore he saw her trying a key in a room that wasn't hers. When confronted, she laughed it off, saying she had gotten lost on her floor. But the look in her eyes didn't match the joke. It was cold, calculating, like someone testing boundaries to see how far she could go. For most guests, the Bayview Grand was a sanctuary, ornate, peaceful, and steeped in history. But in the presence of Karen, the atmosphere began to shift. The grand hallways seemed darker, the chandeliers less bright, and the comforting sound of the ocean outside was drowned out by the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The hotel staff tried to maintain composure, but whispers spread quietly among them. No one could shake the thought that behind the locked door of Karen's suite, something dangerous was waiting to be revealed. On the third day, unease turned into alarm. The hotel had welcomed dozens of guests for a business conference, and among them was Richard Hale, an accountant from out of state. Richard was known for being punctual and methodical, the kind of man who never missed a session, never failed to return calls, and always kept his belongings neatly organized. When he didn't show up for a scheduled breakfast with colleagues, no one worried at first. But by evening, when he missed the opening dinner of the conference, concern began to spread. His suitcase was still in his room, his laptop left on the desk, and his car untouched in the lot. It was as if he had stepped out for a moment and never come back. The Bayview Grand had its share of minor mysteries: misplaced luggage, a guest wandering off for a late night walk along the cliffs, but Richard's disappearance was different. The security team was immediately called to review footage, and what they found raised more questions than it answered. Cameras captured Richard entering the hotel lobby late that night, his conference badge still hanging from his neck, a cup of coffee in his hand. He walked toward the elevators, pressed the button, and rode up to his floor. That was the last anyone saw of him. There was no footage of him leaving the building. What drew the most attention was the detail that seemed almost too coincidental. Richard's room was on the same floor as Karen Matthews'. The last camera angle showed him stepping out of the elevator, walking down the corridor, and passing directly in front of her suite. His reflection flickered briefly in the brass-plated number on her door before the footage ended. After that, he vanished. Staff recalled seeing Karen in the corridor that night as well. She had been lingering barefoot outside her room, clutching a key card that wasn't hers. A housekeeper remembered passing her and thinking it was odd how she stood silently in the shadows, her eyes following Richard as he disappeared down the hallway. At the time, the encounter was brushed off as harmless. Now, in light of his disappearance, every detail seemed sinister. Investigators were brought in quickly, questioning staff and reviewing records. Karen's behavior was mentioned more than once. She had demanded privacy, turned away housekeepers, and been the subject of multiple noise complaints. More troubling, she had been spotted at unusual hours, wandering the hotel with a strange intensity. When asked about Richard, she shrugged, claiming she didn't even know who he was. Her dismissive arrogance only deepened suspicion. By the end of the day, tension inside the Bayview Grand was impossible to ignore. Guests whispered in corners, unsettled by the presence of police and the unspoken dread of a missing man. The elegant hotel, once known for its glamour, now felt cloaked in menace. Behind Karen's locked door, the sounds had grown quieter, but the air in the hallway outside seemed heavier, thick with the weight of unanswered questions. No one wanted to say it aloud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Whatever had happened to Richard Hale, the key to the mystery might be hidden inside Karen's guarded suite. When police finally gained access to Karen Matthews's vacated suite, what they uncovered stripped away the illusion of elegance that clung to the Bayview Grand. Karen had abruptly checked out after only a few days, leaving behind unpaid bills, a trashed room, and an annoying sense of unease among staff. She had left in such a hurry that housekeeping was called in immediately, and what they found prompted an emergency call to investigators. At first glance, the suite looked chaotic, but ordinary pillows tossed aside, curtains drawn tight, empty bottles scattered on the floor. But a closer look revealed something far more disturbing. Behind the armoire in the corner, investigators noticed scuff marks on the hardwood, as if the heavy piece of furniture had been dragged repeatedly. When they pulled it away from the wall, a hidden door came into view. It was narrow and old, a relic of the building's early years when maintenance staff had used a network of service corridors to move unseen. Most had been sealed off decades earlier, but this one had remained, forgotten by time. The smell that escaped when the door was opened was overwhelming. Officers covered their mouths and noses as they stepped inside. The passage was dark, cramped, and filled with dust, yet it bore signs of recent use. A blanket lay crumpled on the floor, stained and torn. Flashlights revealed a collection of personal belongings scattered along the narrow path, items that should have never been there. A wristwatch with Richard Hawley's initials engraved on the back. A wallet with his driver's license still inside. Conference materials with his name printed across them. Nearby, tucked into a small alcove, were older, stranger finds. A woman's scarf, faded and fraying, a pair of eyeglasses, a suitcase tagged with a name no one immediately recognized. Detectives pieced together a chilling realization: Richard wasn't he the first guest to vanish under mysterious circumstances at the Bayview Grand. Whispers of disappearances had circulated among locals for years, often dismissed as rumors tied to the hotel's age and history. But now the evidence suggested otherwise. This hidden passage had become more than just a relic. It had been exploited, used as a place to store and conceal the remnants of people who had simply stopped existing within the hotel's walls. Forensic teams moved carefully through the space, cataloging every item, every trace. The deeper they went, the more the corridor revealed its secrets. Scratches marked the plaster, some shallow, some deep, as if made in desperation. The atmosphere was suffocating, the silence heavy. Investigators exchanged grim looks as they realized the extent of what had been hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, staff members recalled Karen's odd behavior with new clarity. Her refusal of housekeeping, her late-night pacing, the keys she carried that no one could account for, it all seemed to tie back to the discovery. Karen had found the forgotten door, and she had used it. Whether she stumbled upon it by chance or sought it out deliberately was uncertain, but the outcome was the same. The secret passages of the Bayview Grand had become her playground, a place where her arrogance met opportunity. What should have been a simple hotel stay now unraveled into something nightmarish. The glittering chandeliers and ocean views could no longer mask the truth. Behind the grand facade of the Bayview, Karen Matthews had carved out a hidden space for her own purposes, and in doing so, she had pulled the hotel's darkest whispers into stark, undeniable reality. Karen Matthews was tracked down less than a week after the horrifying discoveries at the Bayview Grand. Investigators followed a trail of credit card fraud and fake names that led them to a small rented apartment in a neighboring city. She had been living under an alias, moving with the same false confidence she had carried into the hotel, as though she truly believed no one could touch her. When officers arrived, they found her packing hurriedly, stuffing clothes into suitcases and scattering fake IDs across the floor. It was clear she had planned to leave again, vanishing into another hotel, another city, another life. This time, she wasn't quick enough. She was arrested without a struggle, though her eyes burned with the same defiance she had shown everyone at the Bayview Grand. The investigation into her past revealed patterns that startled even seasoned detectives. Karen was no ordinary difficult guest. She was a drifter who had moved from city to city, using hotels as both shelter and hunting ground. Her arrogance wasn't just an unpleasant trait, it was her weapon. She acted as if she were entitled to everything, pushing past boundaries until people gave in just to avoid conflict. That pattern of manipulation had allowed her to slip through cracks, to intimidate staff, and to operate in spaces most people would never dare to exploit. At the Bayview Grand, the forgotten maintenance corridors had given her exactly what she needed: privacy, access, and a place to hide her crimes. The trial became a spectacle. Locals who had once whispered about strange vanishings at the hotel packed the courtroom to watch the woman who had turned rumor into fact. Prosecutors presented the items found in the hidden passage, Richard Hawley's belongings, along with evidence tied to other unsolved disappearances. Witnesses came forward to describe Karen's unsettling presence, her refusal to follow rules, and her constant prowling of the halls. Security footage showing her near Richard's room on the night he vanished played over and over, each replay tightening the case against her. Karen never showed remorse. She smirked as charges were read, rolled her eyes when evidence was presented, and scoffed at witnesses who testified. Her arrogance had not faded. If anything, it had grown, as though she still believed she was above the law itself. But the jury saw through her defiance. After weeks of testimony, they returned with a swift and unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence was harsh life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge remarked that Karen's lack of humanity and utter disregard for others left no room for leniency. She was led away in handcuffs, her head held high as though she were still walking into a hotel lobby expecting special treatment. For the Bayview Grand, the aftermath was permanent. The once proud hotel became infamous, its name tied forever to the case. Guests stopped booking rooms, drawn instead by morbid curiosity to stand outside its grand facade and whisper about the arrogant woman who believed she was untouchable. Karen Matthews had convinced herself that rules never applied to her, but in the end, the one rule she could not escape was justice. The law had caught her, and the walls she once used to hide her secrets became the walls that would hold her for the rest of her life.